Welcome love, welcome light, welcome all free thinkers and seekers of truth and wisdom. You're listening to Love versus Fear, a podcast creating a community founded on principles of liberating education, where we discuss the philosophical topics of truth, love, and freedom, the Holy Trinity. Love versus Fear is a mission to inspire true love, care, empathy, and courage in the hearts of others in order to educate and liberate their minds so that they can then in turn become conscious co-creators of reality and rise up from a condition of fear and become moral and free by acting with complete love and wisdom in spite of fear. Before I get into today's main topic, I like to start off every show from now on with a few intellectually stimulating quotes, poems, and wise words. I will not be providing any sort of accreditation, nor will I ask for any sort of recognition. I am aware this practice might not be fashionable to procure general favor. A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right. In the attempt to avoid everything personal amongst ourselves, compliments as well as censure to individuals make no part of the bulk of my research. For the wise and the worthy need not the triumph of others. Who I am is totally unnecessary information to the public, as the object for attention is the information, truth itself. This podcast is a dedication to the ultimate truth, love, the force that connects and expands all consciousness. Love is the force that guides all to freedom. The fight for truth, love, and freedom is not a physical fight. The fight exists only in your mind. You cannot physically fight for true peace. You can only love. Then you will be at peace. It's easy to run from the darkness. Few run to the darkness to show it the light that it does not yet possess. Education is the drawing out of an individual's innate talent and abilities by imparting the knowledge of languages, scientific reasoning, philosophy and alchemy, history, literature, grammar, logic, rhetoric, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music, the channels through which those abilities would flourish and serve the individual. This is known as a liberal arts education, or the method of learning in which one is freed, a liberal education. Learning is the result of modifiability in the path of neural conductivity. Explanations of even such forms of learning, such as abstractions and generalizations, demand of the neurons only growth, excitability, conductivity, and modifiability. The mind is the connection system of man, and learning is the process of connecting and recognizing the pattern. The situation-response formula is adequate to cover learning of any sort. Cause plus effect equals outcome. In other words, events plus response equal outcome. A complete and holistic understanding as opposed to learning through a form of indoctrination employed by the Soviets, Germans, and now the United States, called master learning, an outcome-based education of direct instruction of an individual's performance to influence and control the behavior and actions of the individual through mind control, teaching one what to think and what to learn, but not how to think and how to learn. A new age of collectivism has emerged. The Dark Ages still reign over humanity, and the depth and persistence of this domination is only now becoming clear. This Dark Age prison has no bars, no steel chains or physical locks. Instead, it is only locked up by misorientation and built on misinformation, caught up in a plethora of conditioned reflexes and driven by the human ego. Both wardener and prisoner attempt eagerly to compete with God. All are interruptibly skeptical of what they do not understand. We are powerfully imprisoned in these dark ages simply by the terms in which we have been conditioned to think, and I'd say we have been conditioned not to think. True enlightenment is the full and complete understanding of every being's sovereignty and the total willingness to accept the responsibility to honor that complete sovereignty and the self and all others. The fact that the aggregate population of humanity does not understand nature is the prime reason for humanity's failure to exercise its options to obtain universally sustainable physical success on this planet. The prime barrier to humanity's discovery and comprehension of nature is the obscurity of the mathematical language of science. Fortunately, nature is not using the strictly imaginary, awkward, and unrealistic coordinate system adopted and taught by modern-day academic science. Modern science uses big, seemingly complicated and trivial words in order to obfuscate the truth. Fortunately, the truth is always simple and elegant and can be understood by any being so long as the ego, or identification with purely physical, is not so calcified in the individual's consciousness it will not allow them to admit mistakes or admit that one is wrong. Hopefully, those quotes provided some sort of stimulating intellectual thought to occur. The reason why I took so long of a break from making videos was because I let my fear stop me. My greatest fear is that not I aim too high and fail, but that I aim too low and succeed. That was just kind of a motivational quote and not truly my greatest fear. In actuality, my greatest fear is harming others with misinformation. But now I realize that the best way to truly learn is to teach. And the best way to truly teach is to learn. The two are one and the same. To truly teach someone, you have to listen to them and understand where they're coming from and put yourself in their shoes. And this takes true empathy, not only to see the world through their eyes, but to understand it through their mind. From here, this point of true understanding and empathy, you can support their growth. And in supporting their growth, you grow as well. So teaching is ultimately just one method of learning, and ultimately we teach by leading by example, because we are all just learning from each other's examples. Everyone's a teacher, and everyone's a student, and if you don't think so, let me just illustrate for a moment that you can learn anything from anyone. You can learn from nescience, and you can learn from ignorance alike. And I know I might lose a few people here, but just try to stay with me. You see, we ought not adopt the mentality, especially when teaching our youth, to enforce and control them to do whatever I say, even at the expense of what I say being wrong, and then have them try and figure it out later by themselves. We ought strive to discover the truth together in unity. We ought educate and humble ourselves in the process and realize we may have some wisdom and some prudence, but we individually and collectively do not have all the answers just yet, and just maybe we are the ones who are actually wrong. And in keeping in this slightly open mind, and not too rigidly skeptical, and not too naive and gullible, we can potentially learn something from someone we are trying to teach, for every moment is a lesson. For example, someone with zero knowledge, or a concept known as negative knowledge, meaning you can be programmed so much with misinformation, you are at a state of negative knowing, and you have to do double the learning now just to unlearn almost everything you've been conditioned with, and reach a state of true knowledge, or gnosis. A lot of people argue if such learning is even possible, and I'm here to tell you anything's possible. And you can do anything you set your mind to, especially when we come together in love. For the very word impossible is spelled I'm possible. The way you can learn from anyone, even if they're in a state of negative knowledge or ignorance or nescience, is to recognize the example they lead. And by doing so, we can learn what to do or what not to do. But before I dive in further, and risk losing you even more, I'm going to attempt to illustrate a bit more on effective methods of learning. It is an educator's task to teach you how to learn, and how to think, not what to learn and what to think. So how do we truly learn? How do we truly recognize the truth, the true difference between a right example and a wrong example? The answer, may it be controversial, as the truth newly discovered usually always is, still nonetheless is the true answer. We need to believe. We need to believe it is possible, and I most certainly am against blind belief and dogma, but we must believe it is possible to recognize the truth. And I emphasize the importance of knowing over belief. But if you are in a state of negative knowledge, where you've been so conditioned and brought to just merely believe in infectious ideologies that have no basis or foundation in reality, ideologies such as solipsism, moral relativism, social Darwinism, and eugenics, and ultimately money, as it is in the current fiat-based monetary system. In believing in just any one of these infectious ideologies that will be a future cornerstone of my discussions in future episodes, you will then also be led to the conclusion and misguided calculations, as many do who are also misled by these poisonous, infectious ideologies, who just merely believe without any real knowledge, the conclusion that there is no such thing as truth. And if there was, it's too complicated to even understand because we're only human. And this is the furthest thing from the truth. And furthermore, it's a prime example of cognitive dissonance, otherwise known as contradictive thinking. For if there was no such thing as truth, this statement would be a truth, hence creating a paradox. But thankfully, there is such thing as truth, and it is absolute and objective to all. We have to seek to demystify the truth, that the truth is obvious and simple in nature, but remains unseen to those in negative knowledge, in other words, those who cannot see. For example, someone with zero knowledge, or a concept known as negative knowledge, meaning you can be programmed so much with misinformation, you are at a state of negative knowing, and you have to do double the learning now just to unlearn almost everything you've been conditioned with and reach a state of true knowledge, or gnosis. A lot of people argue if such learning is even possible, and I'm here to tell you anything's possible, and you can do anything you set your mind to, especially when we come together in love. For the very word impossible is spelled I'm possible. The way you can learn from anyone, even if they're in a state of negative knowledge or ignorance or nescience, is to recognize the example they lead, and by doing so, we can learn what to do or what not to do. But before I dive in further and risk losing you even more, I'm going to attempt to illustrate a bit more on effective methods of learning. It is an educator's task to teach you how to learn and how to think, not what to learn and what to think. So how do we truly learn? How do we truly recognize the truth, the true difference between a right example and a wrong example? The answer, may it be controversial, as the truth newly discovered usually always is, still nonetheless is the true answer. We need to believe. We need to believe it is possible, and I most certainly am against blind belief and dogma, but we must believe it is possible to recognize the truth. And I emphasize the importance of knowing over belief. But if you are in a state of negative knowledge, where you've been so conditioned and brought to just merely believe in infectious ideologies that have no basis or foundation in reality, ideologies such as solipsism, moral relativism, social Darwinism, and eugenics, and ultimately money, as it is in the current fiat-based monetary system. In believing in just any one of these infectious ideologies that will be a future cornerstone of my discussions in future episodes, you will then also be led to the conclusion and misguided calculations, as many do who are also misled by these poisonous, infectious ideologies, who just merely believe without any real knowledge, the conclusion that there is no such thing as truth. And if there was, it's too complicated to even understand because we're only human. And this is the furthest thing from the truth. And furthermore, it's a prime example of cognitive dissonance, otherwise known as contradictive thinking. For if there was no such thing as truth, this statement would be a truth, hence creating a paradox. But thankfully, there is such thing as truth, and it is absolute and objective to all. We have to seek to demystify the truth, that the truth is obvious and simple in nature, but remains unseen to those in negative knowledge, in other words, those who cannot see. The truth is simply cause and effect. It's that which is and that which has occurred, and to find it, we must learn how to recognize it, for it has been obfuscated and occulted on purpose, in order to ensure chaos, so the few with knowledge can rule over the many in ignorance. Recognizing the truth in the state of negative knowledge is not an easy task. We must realize the truth is always simple and balanced. Meaning, truth does not exist in any extreme state, but rather is the middle point of two extremities or extreme opposites. Even the most seemingly complex truths are made up of a myriad of simple truths one can simply discover if one knows how to see. And to see, we must be in a state of balance ourselves. All truths are half-truths, including this one. All rules have exceptions to the rule, including this rule. And it's up to us, this realization of the divine paradox, after we recognize the truth, to then reconcile and remember the truth, bring the two halves of the truth together. And once this great feat accomplished, we may then respect and be responsible for the newly discovered truth. Respect just simply means to re-spectacle, meaning we are taking another look at something and not just looking at it once, judging a book by its cover. It's about not just closing our minds and thinking we fully understand and comprehend the truth, but responding to it. Responsibility simply means our ability to respond to the truth. A further breakdown of the etymology and phonetics or green language of words in order to understand the true meaning of the words we use is necessary and will be discussed in a future episode. But let's try and get back on topic before we get to the main topic of discussion. We need to understand the teachability index and how to reach a state of simplicity, authenticity, and balance within ourselves first, so we can then recognize the truth. Because after all, real recognize real. The teachability index is their ability to learn by way of being taught by someone else. It's extremely dependent upon the open-mindedness or closed-mindedness of the individual being taught. Low teachability derives from arrogance, cynicism, rigid skepticism, naivete, and gullibility. Being too open-minded is also a bad thing. It allows for infectious ideologies to take root, like collectivism, for example. High teachability derives from a balance between healthy skepticism and an open-mindedness, willingness to learn and change. So the key to learning exists in balance. Other methods of learning, such as analogies, allegories, and parables, axioms and maxims, self-evidence, trial and error, process of elimination, the true scientific method, the trivium and quadrivium, will all be discussed and critically examined for their effectiveness in future episodes. So to quickly conclude and recap the introduction, the only thing you should ever believe in is your ability to recognize the truth. The next step is to reconcile and remember the truth. for dreams are merely the light collected by the individual. Once collected, we ought put the truth to practice in moral right application through the trivium. By outputting the information in application, we allow it to be scrutinized, and if falsified, we can then learn from our mistake. This error would most likely go unnoticed without the verification of others. And this process, this method of discovering the truth through trivium and quadrivium, or philosophy, is the end goal in mind of the philosopher. To achieve wisdom for the sake of wisdom, for wisdom is the right application of knowledge. Wisdom is its own reward. Who doesn't want to be wise and apply truth in the right way without initiating harm to any being, sentient or not? Freedom, truth, and love is the ultimate destination and the origins. Philosophy is the vehicle through which the soul travels from one journey to the next, as opposed to ideology, which is likened to a hamster wheel, not the true way to travel, but merely the stagnation of all spiritual growth and development. In this episode, we will discuss the essence and the quintessence of the words philosophy and ideology. The word philosophy is derived from the Greek root words philo and sophis, or sophia. Philo is a word of uncertain origins, nonetheless is a word-forming element meaning to love with affection. The Greeks had many words for love, philia being a love between friends, or a sort of brotherly love. A love we all ought to adopt for each other, for we all have equal potential and value, and should be treated equally. Sophia is the power of discerning truth from lie, right from wrong. It is the skill or knowledge or divine wisdom. So philosophy is the marriage of these two words, and its meaning is the love of wisdom, or the love of right application of knowledge. What is the good? What is the will? What is at the beginning and the end of everything? The human being was made to know the answers to these questions. The human race is condemned to philosophize. Philosophy isn't about the answers, neither is life. It's about the questions that lead us to the next big question. Philosophy is not a process of destroying all of your beliefs and opinions, although it does tend to do that. Philosophy is about bringing us deeper into the inquiry and explanation and examination of our reality. A is A. A thing is not what we want it to be. If we wish to transmute and change a thing, let's not focus on destroying it. Rather, let's focus on creating what we want it to be. We all have our own cross to bear, as the saying goes. We all have fear. Philosophy gives us the courage to truly live. And to truly live means to do the right thing in spite of fear. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey, for the journey is the destination. This podcast is dedicated to teaching philosophy, for the truth will set you free, and everything is at its best when it's free. The most important thing in life are the things, places, people, and ideas that money cannot buy: truth, love, and freedom. Most gracefully and humbly do I ask you to please trust me when I say I'm far from perfect in my own understanding of the principles I try to elucidate and explicate, but on my journey I still strive to connect with others and share my ideas of philosophy and spirituality in hopes of refining and improving upon my current foundation. I seek to create a monument to truth in all that I do, For karma is real, and you truly can only get what you give. This is what it means to truly love, to truly let go. And if what you let go is true, it will come back to you in abundance. Shifting from fear to love, a topic we will discuss often in future episodes, is learning to let go of control, learning to let go of things, and learning to embrace freedom and uncertainty, and learning to trust the universe. Love is letting something be as it is and supporting the authenticity and realness of something without trying to control it or take it for yourself, but simply be and let be. The golden rule: be kind to all kind. And this is the crux of natural law, of philosophy and spirituality. The quintessence is common sense. Unfortunately, consciousness is a rarity on our world, and is the task of the philosopher to use his philosopher's stone, the heart, the infinity gauntlet of the mind, and turn lead into gold, fear into love, and through agnotology, darkness into light. Philosophy is the love of wisdom, the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge. The goal of science and technology is to discover the truth. The goal of philosophy is to apply the truth in any such way that is right and does not initiate harm. This will and can only manifest love, the expression of joy and care over time. And if you don't use your love, care, and will to understand what is real or right, you will inevitably lose your rights, your care, your love, and your free will. We do not get what we want. We get what we give, and what we give is what we deserve. Wisdom and the soul and the self are all one. Wisdom seeks the self, and the self seeks wisdom. But the words I utter will do little justice. To truly educate, thoughts, emotions, and actions must unify. We must practice what we preach. Just speaking leads us to the door of wisdom. We must then take responsibility to walk through the door. Only in experience or gnosis can true knowledge be gained, for it is our philosophy or actions that define us. With right action and application of knowledge, all fear is dispelled. The only reasons we are enslaved is because we are in a state of fear, especially fear of what can happen to us in this world. The controllers of the world own the world because they own your mind. Whomever or whatever owns your thoughts, emotions, and your actions, what you mostly think, feel, do, perceive, and remember, is controlling your consciousness. Fear, money, and dogma is termed the unholy trinity. They are the top 3 methods of mind control. I have discovered these poisonous to the soul infectious ideologies have no real bearing in truth, and cannot manifest love, knowledge, self-dominion, freedom, and order. Ideology is not a philosophy. Philosophy, as discussed previously, is the love of wisdom, and ought to be attempted in honesty, proceed from first principles in light, love, and liberty. Ideologies are ways of thinking that do not lead to higher wisdom, as the term is generally accepted is to mean a system of ideas and ideals, especially one which forms the basis of economic or political theory and policy, and also the study of ideas, their origin and nature, which is more closely accurate to the truth. Philosophies are for truth seekers and the wise. Ideologies or ideologues are for idiots and folly. Ideologies are uncompromising and dogmatic. Ideologies are theories, most of which have no basis in truth. The etymology of ideology comes from 2 words and a Greek combining vowel. O is the Greek combining vowel because the elements are Greek, the Greek combining vowel is O. Idea and logy are the two words. The word idea is the archetype concept of a thing in the mind of God. In other words, an idea is a kind, sort, mode, fashion, class, species, or nature in logic. Idea comes from eidin, meaning to see. In Platonic philosophy, an idea is an archetype or pure immaterial pattern of which the individual objects of any one natural class are but the imperfect copies of truth, in which they have their being. An idea is not real. It merely has the potential to influence the creative process. It is a mental image or picture. Logy, the second word, and ideology is a word-forming element, meaning a speaking or discourse or treatise, doctrine, theory, or science. It is the character or deportment of one who speaks of a certain subject. Also means to collect or gather. So when we bring together these two words to create ideology, we get its true meaning, the science of ideas. I do not wish to attack all ideas, for all are ideas, which exist in the mind of God. For God is the mind, or consciousness, or light, love, and liberty, the Holy Trinity, which is the fabric of existence and creation. I only wish to negate those who are solely reliant and dependent on merely ideas and not reality itself. If you do not like reality, you are going to need a philosophy to change it, not an ideology which is based on belief alone, but a philosophy which is based in knowing the truth. There exists a truth. Being full of ideas can be potentially beneficial to an individual, but being only full of ideas is most certainly detrimental. One must anchor the self first in first principles, which exist as truth and not fiction. Critical examination and reflection of the self in relation to one's environment is necessary when searching for the truth. We will continue to erect barriers of consciousness and lacks of understandings of who and what we are by continuing to just merely believe in ideologies. The only thing you should ever just merely believe in is your ability to recognize the truth. But take what I say with a grain of salt. The worst thing you could ever do is just merely believe in what I say without reason or empathy, which, when the two combine, create true spiritual understanding. Realize inside yourself is hidden the greatest gem in the universe. Know thyself, and you will know the universe and the gods. You will know true love, which is the gem that dwells in the heart. Real love is an expanded state of awareness. Because you have the knowledge, you ought care enough to propagate that knowledge, and this takes courage, for spiritual war plagues humanity. Freedom is an illusion under this current state of mind control. Ultimately, you only have two choices: love or fear. No matter what you choose, God bless you. And if you enjoyed this episode of Truth 101, please leave a like and subscribe. And if you want to see a particular subject be discussed in a future episode, whether it be controversial or common sense, please leave a suggestion or a comment on this video on whatever platform you're viewing it on. Also, I'd like to make very clear, I am strongly against the monetary system as it is currently a fiat-based currency. However, I recognize the pure extortion and slavery that I am fettered to under taxation and government. So if you found the same value in this video as you do every morning in a cup of coffee, I'd appreciate you if you donated the price you pay for that said cup of joe, or more if you'd like, to my Patreon or Venmo, the links to which can be found in the description. Thank you. And remember, don't let fear consume you. Let love guide you. Peace.